Good afternoon, Year 6. My name is Miss Sansam and I'm the Director of Science here at Kelvin Hall School. For this session on your transition week, we are going to be doing a biology lesson, which is all about food chains and food webs. Now, in your transition booklet, you will have a food chains and food webs worksheet and some lined paper. Please do not complete the worksheet just yet. We will do that towards the end of the lesson. But to start with, can you please write the date and title onto the lined paper and have a go at the starter for me? So hopefully you'll be able to see the picture that is on the screen. It's got some different animals on there. And there are 3 questions I would like you to have a go at answering. They are, what do you think is happening in the picture? What do you think the picture is an example of? And what do you think would happen if we remove something from that picture? Now, your teacher will be able to pause this video and give you 5 minutes to try and answer those 3 questions. Hopefully you've had a chance to answer the questions then. Happening in the picture, hopefully you are able to see that there is a bird, and in its beak is a fish, and in the fish's mouth is another fish. And this is an example of a food chain that we can see right in front of our eyes. Hopefully you had a chance to either write down or have a discussion about what would happen if we remove something. Now, obviously, if we was to remove one of the fish from that picture or their species entirely, then what would happen is that would have a really knock-on effect to their food chain because other organisms may not have enough food. So that's what today's lesson is going to be about. What we are aiming for is we are going to be able to interpret food chains and webs and identify the different components of them. We're going to be able to construct food chains and food webs. So basically that means making your own. And we are going to explain the energy flow through food chains and webs and why it changes at each level. So just to start then, I'd like you to have a think about. So first of all, think about it on your own. Then you can discuss with a partner and then you can share with your class. I would like you to think about these 2 questions. So they are, what resources do all organisms need to survive? And do you think it's different for animals and plants? So think about animals and plants out in the wild. What do they need in order to survive? So you can put 2 columns on your piece of lined paper, one for animals, one for plants. And I'll just give you 1 minute. Again, your teacher can pause the video, have a think about the different resources that they need. And there is a question down there at the bottom. What do you think would happen if they didn't get all of those things? So hopefully you've had a chance to get some ideas down. Now the ideas that I've got down on my slides. So animals out in the wild, they need food, they need water, they need space, somewhere to live, and they need mates. So they need to be able to reproduce. So some similarities with plants, but plants also need some different things. Plants need light, they need space in order to grow, they need water, and they need different minerals, and they get that from the soil. And the question down there at the bottom, if an organism didn't get all of those things, then probably what would happen is that they would die. And like we said earlier in the starter, if an organism was to die, it could have an impact on the food chain or the food web that it is in. And that is because some organisms might be left with no food. Food chains then, and how we draw them and how we can interpret them. So food chains always go from left to right, and the arrows always point from left to right. They always start with what we call a producer. Now, a producer is a green plant or something similar. In my example here, my producer is grass. Always after a producer, you have a primary consumer, and that is usually a herbivore. Now, hopefully you've heard of the word herbivore before. So herbivores are organisms that only eat plants. The example of the primary consumer and the herbivore in my food chain is a hare. which is this animal here. They're just slightly bigger than a rabbit. Next, we have a secondary consumer, which are normally a carnivore. Hopefully you've heard the word carnivore before. So a carnivore are animals that only eat other animals. And the example that I've got here is a lynx. Now, a lynx is a species of cat, and it is smaller than a big cat, so smaller than your lions, your tigers, things like that, but bigger than the cats you would get at home. And just this point down there at the bottom, which is really important. So what food chains actually show us is the energy transfer that is going on. And it always goes in the direction of the arrow. And basically, that's what the arrow means. So the arrow means that energy is being transferred from the grass into the hare when the hare eats it. And then the energy is being transferred to the lynx from the hare when the lynx eats the hare. So like it says there down in the bracket, basically it shows you what eats what. So it shows us that the hare is eating the grass and the lynx is eating the hare. And it also shows us where the energy is going. So the energy is going from the grass into the hare and from the hare into the lynx. Here's a different example. So now I've got grass seed with my arrow again going from left to right. I've got a vole, which is a small mammal. And then I've got an owl. So the vole eats the grass seed, the barn owl eats the vole. And again, like the arrow at the bottom shows, it shows that transfer of energy. So energy from the grass seed is transferred into the vole, and energy from the vole is transferred to the barn owl. Okay, so next task that I would like you to do, please, Year 6. I've given you some examples of some organisms, and what I would like you to do, I would like you to arrange them into food chains. Now, I'm sorry if the diagram has scared any of you. Obviously, that is for number 4, and that is our zombie. If you need some help, Year 6, then I'm going to leave that on there for you. So you've got numbers 1 to 4. So what I would like you to do, please, is make those organisms that I've given you into food chains. Should probably take you about 5 minutes. So again, your teacher can pause the video and you can have a go at making those food chains. Let's go through the answers then. So hopefully we got these all right. So for number 1, we should have had grass seed, arrow, vole, arrow, barn owl. For number 2, we should have had grass, arrow, grasshopper, arrow, snake, arrow, hawk. For number 3, it's a slightly longer food chain this time, we should have had grass, arrow, grasshopper, arrow, spider, arrow, sparrow, arrow, hawk. And then for number 4, the last one, grass, arrow, cow, arrow, human, arrow, zombie. So give yourself a big tick and give yourself a score out of 4. Hopefully you understand where you went wrong if you didn't quite get 4 out of 4. And like we've said, you can see there on the left-hand side, they all start with a producer. So they start with a green plant or something similar. And you can see the arrows all go in the same direction. And that is because it's showing you the direction of energy transfer. And it's also showing you what eats what. So for example, on number 3, the grasshopper eats the grass, the spider eats the grasshopper, the sparrow eats the spider, and then the hawk eats the sparrow. The next one I would like you to have a go at then. So on your line paper, can you have a go at for me writing these food chains from the information that I have given you? So if you start at the bottom is the easiest one. So it says broccoli is eaten by robins, whom are eaten by cats. So can you make that into a food chain for me? And then the middle one, pondweed is eaten by insects. The insects are then eaten by ducks, and then foxes eat the ducks. So again, can you please make that into a food chain for me? And then the top one, in the sea, sharks eat tuna fish, which in turn eat shrimp. The shrimp feed on plankton. Now be careful with that one because I've said it like it's going to be the wrong way around. Remember, your food chain should always start on the left-hand side with the producer. So again, your teacher will pause the video, 3 minutes, make me the 3 food chains. Hopefully was able to get those right then. So what you should have had for the bottom one, you should have had broccoli, arrow, robin, arrow, cats. For the middle one, pondweed, arrow, insects, arrow, ducks, arrow, foxes. And for the top one, it should have started with plankton, then an arrow to shrimp, then an arrow to tuna, and then an arrow to sharks. Again, give yourself a tick if you got those correct and give yourself a mark out of 3. Well done if you got all 3 correct. Again, just introducing some new keywords for you Year 6. So my example of a food chain on this slide is the sun to grass, to grasshopper, to shrew, to owl. Now, the energy for all food chains comes from the sun, but we don't tend to put the sun on every food chain just because it's not needed. Like I said previously, they start with a producer, which is usually a green plant or something similar. You then get a primary consumer. So obviously primary usually means first. So it's the first consumer that eats the producer. Secondary means second. So it's the second consumer up that food chain. And this word here, tertiary, basically means third. So it's the third consumer of that food chain. Got some other words down here as well that hopefully you've heard of before. You've got herbivore. So for example, in this example, the grasshopper is a herbivore and your shrew and your owl are carnivores. And then the grasshopper is prey. The shrew is both a predator and prey because it is a predator because it eats the grasshopper, but it's also a prey of the owl. And then you've got the owl right up at the top of the food chain. And again, obviously that would be a predator. So just to make sure that we know these keywords then, what I would like you to do, Year 6, I would like you please to match these keywords up. So on your lined paper, write your keywords down the left-hand side and match them up with their definition on the right-hand side. So just to clarify, they are in the wrong order. What you need to do is match them up. Again, your teacher will pause this video, so you've got time. It'll probably take you between 5 and 10 minutes. Let's have a look at these answers then. So hopefully for producers, we got that they are green plants and they make food using light energy from the sun in a process called photosynthesis. If you did get that one, give yourself a big tick. Primary consumers, they are the things that eat plants, so we call them herbivores, and you've got some examples there for you. Again, if you got that right, give yourself a big tick. Secondary consumers, they are the things that eat animals or parts of animals, and we call them carnivores. Again, you've got some examples. If you got that right, give yourself a big tick. Predators are organisms which kill food. They can be secondary or tertiary. Remember, secondary just means they are the second consumer on the food chain. Tertiary means they are the third. Prey are the animals that predators kill and eat. And hopefully we've heard of omnivores before, and they are animals that eat both plants and or animals. It's like most humans. Most humans are omnivores. We eat a mixture of both plants and animals. Give yourself a score out of 6. Hopefully we got 6 out of 6. If you did, fantastic, well done. If you didn't, don't worry. Hopefully you understand these definitions now and you understand where you went wrong. Moving on to food webs then. So we've talked a lot about food chains. All food webs are just lots of chains that are all linked together. And I've got an example there on the screen for you. So you should be able to see lots of different food chains throughout this food web. One being, for example, you could go grass to vole to goshawk to great horned owl. Or a different one, you could go aspen to beetle to thrush to goshawk to great horned owl. They're just lots of different chains all linked together. Now, here is a food web that I have made, and over the next kind of 10 minutes or so, I'm going to pose you different questions about what would happen if some of these organisms were to die out. And I'm going to ask you what you think would happen to the other organisms in this food web. So just to give you some backstory then. So I've got a disease, it's spreading through the rainforest and it's affecting the insects. And it's killing most of them out in only a few weeks. So relatively speaking, that's very, very quickly. So I'll show you on my food web then. So you'll just be able to see that on the right-hand side in the yellow box. So my insects have died out. I've got no more insects. My first question to you, Year 6, is what would happen to the number of iguanas? So I'll put the food web back on. And again, your teacher can pause the video so it gives you a bit of chance to be able to look at the food web and answer this question. So there's the food web back. So the insects have gone. So the insects were here. And I would like to know, please, Year 6, just a sentence or two. I'll give you 2 minutes. What would happen to the number of iguanas? So have a think. Did the iguanas eat the insects? If they did, what's going to happen to the number of iguanas now there are no more insects? So your teacher can pause the video so you have a chance to write your answer. Hopefully then we got something along these lines, Year 6, in the fact that the number of iguanas is going to go down or it's going to decrease. And that's because insects was the only food that they ate. Okay, so if the number of insects decreased and they all died out because of this disease, then the number of iguanas is going to decrease because they've got nothing else to eat. Hopefully you all got an answer similar to that. The next one then, so same food web, same insects have been killed off. Now I'd like you to look at the number of parrots. And my question to you is, why might the number of parrots stay the same? So here's the food web back. So obviously insects were here. Here are your parrots in the blue. Now, even though insects have died out, my question to you is, why might the number of parrots stay the same? So again, your teacher can pause the video, give you a couple of minutes to answer that question. Bit of a longer answer this time than Year 6. So what I've got, you may have something slightly different, which is absolutely fine. But my answer, so parrots can also eat seeds, bananas, and coconuts. So they may just eat more of these foods to make up from what they are missing from eating the insects. However, though, that's going to have an impact on the other animals who also eat those foods. So because the parrots are eating more seeds, bananas, and coconuts, there may not be as many of them for the other animals in that food web that eat them. So give yourself a tick if you got something along those lines. If you had a different idea, that's absolutely fine. I'm sure, obviously, you'll be talking that through with your teacher, whoever that may be. My next one then, Year 6. So again, same food web, same insects have died out. Bit of a trickier question this time, though. And I want to know, why would fewer insects maybe affect the number of chimpanzees? So here we go. So my insects were down here and they've gone. I want you to have a think about why it might affect my chimpanzees, which are here in my blue box. So again, if your teacher can pause the video, I'll give you a chance to have a good look at this food web. Why might it affect the number of chimpanzees? Here's my answer then. Like I said before on the previous question, you may have something slightly different. Don't worry if you found this one a little bit tricky. It was quite a difficult question. So my answer then, so red-eyed frogs only eat insects, so their numbers are going to decrease. And that's going to mean that there is less frogs for the jaguars to eat. So they would eat more of the other foods that they eat, which include chimpanzees, which could make their numbers go down. If you've got anything along those lines, Year 6, give yourself a big tick and a big well done from me. If you didn't, don't worry. Like I said, that was quite a tricky question, and this is quite a complex food web. So hopefully then you all had the chance to have a go at all 3 of those questions about that food web. And what we call this is disruption to food webs. So like we spoke about earlier, if the numbers of one organism were to increase or decrease in a food web, it does have an effect on all the other organisms. The next thing I would like you to do, Year 6, you should have a worksheet in your transition booklet that looks like this, or at least question 1 looks like this. What I would like you to do, probably take about 15 minutes, so your teacher can pause the video. I would like you to have a go, please, at the worksheet that you've got in your transition booklet. So if you pause the video now, and then I will go through the answers with you. So hopefully you've had a chance to have a look at this worksheet and get an answer for everything. So I'm just going to go through the answers, so make sure you mark your work as we go along. So the arrow then in a food chain, it means the direction of energy transfer, or it means what eats what. The producer in this food chain is lettuce. The third trophic level is the ladybird, because that's the third one along. The tertiary consumer, however, is the thrush, because the green fly is the primary consumer. The ladybird is the secondary consumer, making the thrush the tertiary consumer. And the ultimate source of energy that drives this food chain is the sun, because that's where the lettuce gets its energy from at the beginning. Question number 2, I've added the arrows in there on the right-hand side. Part B, the producer in this food web is the grass. A consumer, you can have any of the slug, the rabbit, the thrush, the fox, or the cat. What eats the rabbits? Foxes and cats eat rabbits. And what does a fox eat? A fox eats slugs and rabbits. And question number 3, this more complex food web. 2 producers in the food web are land plants and tiny water plants. 3 consumers, you can have anything apart from the plants, so any 3 of them. A food chain with 6 trophic levels is below, so you could pick tiny water plants, then the water fleas, the diving beetle, the small fish, the perch, and then the heron. Well done if you figured that one out. The animals that the small fish eats are diving beetles and water fleas. The animals that eat the small fish are the heron and the perch. And then if the frogs suddenly died, so obviously you've got your frogs here, it would mean the foxes and the herons may have less food, so may have to start eating more small fish or more slugs. But it may also increase the number of slugs, insects, and diving beetles, because if all the frogs suddenly died, it would mean that nothing was eating them. So obviously their numbers might increase. So give yourself a mark for all of that worksheet Year 6. So add up all the ones that you got right. And a big well done from me from having a go at them. And then the last thing I would like you to leave, you with Year 6 is a picture. And again, you can pause the video and you can have a discussion about what do you think happened next. So what do you think has caused this picture to happen? And what impact do you think it has had on all the other organisms that are living in that area? Okay, Year 6, so that is my lesson now over. I want to say a big thank you for taking part and a big well done. Hopefully you understood that and you can now draw and interpret food chains and food webs. This is something you will do at Kelvin in September. So don't worry if you didn't understand absolutely everything, that's absolutely fine. And I'm sorry that obviously you didn't get the chance to come into Kelvin at this time for your transition week, but we are really looking forward to welcoming you in September. Have a lovely summer holidays and we will see you then. Thank you.